Wanderstop is a nice, relaxing, whimsical game about farming, talking to a colorful cast of characters, making tea, and... So who made this game again? Ah, yeah, that checks out. Wanderstop tackles a topic that we just don't see very often in media in general. Burnout, and it's a pretty good exploration of the topic too. Despite there being no combat at all, it felt brutal sometimes, but in a more emotional way. We see our main character Alta, a former world champion swordswoman, winner 3 years running, finally get defeated and just beat herself up for it, falling into a deep depression and self-destructive behavior. In response, she decides to find the former world champion and get training from her, only for this very sad scene to play where she's running through the forest, looking for this person, only to become exhausted, but she pushes through over and over until it starts to physically harm her. She can't even lift her sword anymore, and she eventually passes out. She's saved by a local tea shop owner Boros, and is convinced to help out at the shop. She is burnt out mentally, physically, just in every way. Her drive has pushed her to do incredible things, but has also nearly destroyed her and made her hate herself. Boros, by convincing her to help at the shop, helps her to slow down and maybe move on to a new stage in her life. And what I really like is that the game shows this in a very interesting way. It has a really cool loop for a cozy game. You go about making your tea, helping customers, and finding various things to decorate your shop with, like new unique cups to drink from and growing your garden. But after a certain point, after you've helped everyone around the shop, the game almost resets. You go to the shrine and meditate, you're given a warning, and you can take all the time you want to grow more crops and whatnot. But if you want to progress, get more story, see new characters, new seeds, and thus new teas, you have to go through this reset process. But this reset gets rid of everything. Your crops are gone, the cups and most of your decorations around the shop disappear, and the customers you've become accustomed to leave, often never to be seen again. It's kind of like starting a new season. All the leaves change color and everything narratively and mechanically moves forward, and you now have a clean slate to find new trinkets and plants to customize everything once again. It sounds counter to everything you would want from a cozy game. Cozy games are supposed to be about slowly building up and making a home of your own, and it's hard to do that when all of your customization options just go poof every so often. But it works. It works really well actually. Mechanically, it felt refreshing to wipe the slate clean, a new garden where I can now plan things out a bit better. At the start of the game, I felt the need to gather as much fruit as possible just to have in my inventory in case I needed it, which became cumbersome with the pretty limited inventory space. I was actually starting to run out of shelves and tables to store my excess. But this reset cleaned out my inventory and taught me that I just don't need to hoard items, there's no point, and that it was fine to just take my time. It prevented things from getting overwhelming. It kind of stopped me from harming myself, so to speak. But also helped to shape our main character too, because at the start of the game I would often pick the kind of ruder dialogue options because that's what made sense for the character. Alta is a very rude and rough character. This change felt like a good opportunity though to shift her personality a bit. It allowed me to give the main character a very natural feeling progression, which is not easy in the game with dialogue options, but it really worked thematically because there are a few things that persist throughout that change. A theme of this game is about slowing down and enjoying the moment, even if it's fleeting, especially if it's fleeting, and how it's those small fleeting moments that can stick with you. So it's interesting then that the few items that do stick around are the decorative items you get from other characters. One of these items for me was from this father who was basically the embodiment of an embarrassing father figure. He is trying to become a knight to impress his son. He comes and goes from the shop and at some point he finds an old stop sign. He convinces himself it was something greater and tries to figure out more about it, but eventually he just gives it to you. He also gets cursed by a witch on one of his adventures, seemingly being slowly possessed until he struggles to remember who he is, or even who his child is. It is heartbreaking to see this proud, happy-go-lucky father slowly forget himself and his family. And then once we go through that reset process, he's gone, he disappears, and probably never to be seen again. So after that reset, everything disappeared except for that stupid stop sign that he gave me, and it actually made me think about him and made me worry about him. The supposed knight was so silly and stupid and maybe a little annoying, but seeing that stop sign I couldn't help but think of him and worry about him. Last we saw he was being taken over by a curse after all. It made me remember and think about the past interactions that I had with him and see it in a bit of a new light, like thinking back on moments with your friends that you may not have seen for a while and you wonder how they're doing. Like how that sign sticks around, so too does that character's impact on a smaller, more emotional level stick with you and the main character, Alta. What is done with that, well, that's up to you. I like how a lot of these character stories are not wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow like you would expect. They're still satisfying, of course, but I don't know what happens to that knight. I don't know if he cured his curse or not, or was taken over by it. It makes the world feel a little bit more real, more tragic. These people are living their own lives with their own problems they have to resolve themselves. Like Alta, they have their own internal struggles, and those stories cross over with Alta here and there, but don't revolve around her at the end of the day. They're just customers at her shop at the end of the day, and their lives eventually diverge. But no matter what, no matter how much time passes, a part of these characters remains, for better or worse, both emotionally and their impact on our main character, but also physically through the gifts they give us. Whether that's a silly stop sign or a big wind chime, they're still a part of your journey, of Alta's journey. And when that time to advance the story does come, it gets eerie. Everyone, aside from Boros, can no longer talk to you. Not that they won't talk to you, they just straight up can't. Attempting to talk to people only brings creepy silence. It's weird, it's wrong. You can continue to make tea and garden, but it's as if the forest your tea shop resides in is telling you this isn't right. Like it's telling you that you can't remain stagnant, stuck in the past no matter how content you may be. The only way for things to change is to move forward. You have to move on if you ever want to grow or change, and sometimes that means you have to leave things behind. It is such a clever way to work its themes into the gameplay, and we see these themes also expressed through some of the characters we meet at the shop, like this warrior character who idolized Alta in her prime. Much like Alta, I really liked this character when we first met him. This was the first time we got to see Alta open up a little bit. He was fun, he was interesting, and he felt like the first character Alta could really relate to, both being warriors and all. He was also driven to become the strongest in the world at any cost and never stopping. But as they become more familiar with each other, the relationship becomes strained as he learns of Alta's problem and tries to fix it in a way only a warrior would, by going on a dangerous quest, but Alta, beginning to kind of understand she can't do that anymore, refuses. He leaves, but we eventually see what that single-minded drive to push forward no matter what cost him, and it cost him dearly. And all this happens because he refuses to acknowledge that his hero, Alta, is beginning to change, to become a different person. He instead pushes ahead, refusing to look at anything differently, and pays for it. This was a character who, in a very short period of time, I went from viewing as a friend to kind of hating, only to then see what happened to him and immediately feel bad for him and want to help, but also knowing that there's just not much I could do. He and Alta are both kind of mirrors of each other, both start as proud warriors and both forced onto a very different path. And like many of the characters that come through the tea shop, he leaves behind something that every now and then I would pass by and just couldn't help but feel something. He was just a person living his own life, making his own mistakes and dealing with the consequences as he and Alta drifted in and out of each other's lives. It feels uncomfortably real. It's very melancholy. All Alta can really do is hope for the best and learn from his mistakes. All the characters we serve tea to come in and out of Alta's life, some inadvertently showing her what could have become of her had she continued on her path in one way or another. Others help her to open up, even if only a little, and some are just fun people to be around that you spend a short fleeting moment with, but they still have an impact on her life, some in small ways, others in much bigger ways. It is all beautiful in, as I said before, a very melancholic way. And all of those customers you meet were just so fun and fascinating to learn about, and interestingly enough, it wasn't because all of them had some big storyline to them. A lot of them didn't actually. A lot of the characters were just really interesting people. They'd be strange fantasy creatures from far-off lands with a culture that forbids drinking tea, or a magical girl with a strange way of speaking. You get to learn about all these strange people and places by talking to them, getting little tidbits about their culture or history. And the gameplay does try to work with the narrative as well, and it mostly succeeds at it. So much of the game is about slowing down and resting that the gameplay, which is also kind of slow, also forces you to slow down as well. Swapping items can feel a little cumbersome. You can't hold very many tea ingredients. You have to go out, gather tea leaves and wait for them to dry, and you have to regularly make trips to fill up your watering can, and plants only give a fairly limited amount of seeds or fruit. That being said, the gameplay is the worst part. I would not recommend it based on that, but I love it when games try to merge their narrative with their gameplay. It's something I think all games should do, and they do a fairly good job here. I just wish there was a touch more depth. The gardening aspect starts off interesting, with you having to plant certain plants around each other to grow new ones, or in certain patterns and different combos to get fruit trees. But it never grows on that idea. The pattern is always the same no matter what you're trying to grow, just with different colors, and it's always 3 of the same color. So it'll be 1 blue seed in the middle with 3 yellow seeds surrounding it, or 3 green seeds. Repeat with every color of seed and do the same with a different seed in the middle. I'd have liked to see different patterns or something, different combinations to experiment with. We've seen a bit of that with the tea making process, where people start asking for more and more complex teas requiring multiple types of fruit, or in one case a book, or asking for it to elicit a certain emotion. But they're never too hard to figure out. I hope they'd be almost like a puzzle, but the field manual you get at the beginning of the game details all the fruits you can get, how to make them, and more importantly, what they taste like and the emotion or type of memory they elicit. So anytime someone asked for a specific type of tea, it was just a quick skim through the field manual and I was done. And even if you get it wrong, they don't care much and you can just try again, which that part I'm kind of okay with because it is a cozy game after all. So yeah, the gameplay, not that great, but it's not bad either. It's just a little too simplistic for my taste. I would have liked more complexity. At the same time, that's kind of the point from an artistic standpoint. Adjust glasses. From an artistic standpoint, it makes sense. The game's all about slowing down, learning to relax, and that it's okay if you just don't have anything to do, so the simpler gameplay allows for that. Technically, you do always have something to do, clean up the area around the shop, cut weeds, gather tea, garden, etc., but there's never any urgency to them. Characters will wait patiently for their order, don't care much if you get it wrong, and the amount of weeds or piles of leaves around the shop don't affect anything other than aesthetics, really. You can take your time. It's not a big deal. Hang out, drink tea, get to know your customers a bit, relax, and just enjoy the atmosphere, which has a very whimsical feel to it, with the bright pastel colors and a tea machine that looks ripped straight out of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It has all these switches and levers and valves you gotta use in a certain order. It's way overly complicated for a task so simple, yet that's what makes it so fun. I never got tired of making tea because the machine was almost a childlike wonder to operating it. It also helps that, despite all the steps, it doesn't take long to do. And that whimsical feeling is a nice contrast to the darker story. It kind of lulls you into a false sense of security, distracting you with charming, silly characters so that when those darker moments hit, they feel like they hit all the harder because they're unexpected, while also giving a nice break after the fact, a safe space to help you wind down and ruminate on the stories and themes. And that contrast also helped the story feel a little bit more real to me. Life isn't just all bad or all good. You've probably heard that life is like a roller coaster before, but it's not a particularly good one. The highs and lows aren't perfectly paced to make the most exciting experience. Sometimes very silly moments happen right next to very dark moments and vice versa. So having a very serious moment in the story juxtaposed by a very ridiculous character or working a tea machine only the Mad Hatter would own honestly sold the world, characters, and plot better than you would think. Wanderstop is one of the most unique cozy games with a standout story that merges its gameplay with its narrative and tackles a subject that's unfortunately only becoming more and more relevant for more and more people. If you're more of a gameplay focused person, you may find it a little too simple, but the story carries it and makes it an experience more than worth having.